I was a Rotary exchange student myself to Mexico, 83, 84. My kids went out both to France and Italy, 2011, 2012, and 2014, 15. So we're a big Rotary family. When we travel together, we've got the languages covered. So it's kind of fun. If you're interested, or if you know of anyone else who might be interested in this e-format with a focus on cultural youth exchange, we do have a very affordable way for people to become new Rotarians through this e-thing. And I think Olga, being down in Southwest Minnesota, is a perfect example of this as an opportunity, something that fits into people's schedules. Really, geography doesn't matter at all. We're also trying to really bring in some recently returned exchange students as a way of getting them involved with Rotary earlier than what may have otherwise happened. As such, we try to keep our dues very low, $25 a month, or annually discounted to $270. We would love to have any new members if you can think of anyone. I know we had someone who was with us a couple of years ago from Texas who had a disabling accident and no longer was able to attend his regular meetings, so had joined us for a while. So, and the other thing, if you're a Rotarian in a traditional club, we do have a supporting eClub Friends program, $100 a year, to help a new club get off the ground. And yeah, for that, come and join us as many times as you would like, which you can do anyway. Unlimited meeting makeups if that is important to you. And really just, again, a way of supporting us as a new club. Oops, Tom, I didn't switch your photo out for Sarah's. Okay, everyone put their hand over Tom's face on this one. Our speaker next week is Sarah Tuberty. She's out on the East Coast, and District Governor Paul heard her speak. Was that at the International Conference last year?
It was actually in the Rotarian magazine. It was just an article. It was seemed like it was something very interesting for any club, but certainly when you were meeting virtually, it was a good opportunity to have her come in. Yeah,
Sarah has very generously offered to speak with us next week. So she's a former Rotary exchange student and lives with limb differences. And her message is really about thriving in life. It should be a really interesting and exciting presentation next week. So please do join us. And as always, we record every single meeting. It's always on the website. Just come on back at Rotary eClub 5960.org, or find us on Facebook and you can link to those meetings. So now you can take your hand away from the screen. Tom Thorfinnson, Chief Strategy Officer for RI, is with us today. And Tom, we're just really thrilled to have you here. Talking about the future of Rotary and COVID-19. I mean, this, as Ed said, it's a huge disappointment for people around the world, not just us, that COVID-19 is having such an impact on youth exchange this coming year. But it's not limited to youth exchange, it's Rotary. I mean, it's all of us, all of our families, all of our countries. So it's with a really warm, oh, you know what, Chris Ann, I've done it again. I was gonna have Chris, so Chris Ann, I'm gonna turn it over to you. And because you have known Tom for many, many years. So give us some of the background on who this guy is and who we're about to hear from.
Well, Tom is a very good friend of mine, and he's become kind of an important guy at RI. But I feel like most of us on this call know him when he was way more active in Minneapolis and St. Paul. He began as a Rotarian at the Hopkins Rotary Club and is now a member of the Eden Prairie Noon Club. He served as the 5950 district governor in 96-97, and he chaired our North Star Rotary Youth Exchange program from 1999 to 2000. And that was an eventful year, Tom. I don't know if you recall, but I felt like the kids going from 1999 into 2000, there was something in the air and they got in trouble a lot. So that was Tom's year. But he is the Chief Strategy Officer for Rotary. He actually gave us advice when we rebranded this club. I had connected with him and asked him, Tom, should we you know, we were thinking we want to get some younger people into Rotary. Maybe we should have a big umbrella of all the, Tom, I forget what it's called, but I mean, all the kind of the youth programs. And he was like, listen, if you guys like youth exchange, just make it youth exchange. Yeah. And we followed your advice, and I'm glad that we did. The focus is really important for us. So thank you, Tom, for agreeing to speak with us today. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to say.
Thanks, Chris Ann. And with that, let's welcome Tom.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you. We'll want to share the screen for a little bit with you. So if you could allow me to do that, that would be great. It's good to be with everyone. I have been doing this occasionally now, and it's interesting because I had gotten away from presenting to clubs almost completely. And suddenly, all of us find ourselves in circumstances where it's much easier to present to clubs, and I get a little worried sometimes that I'm saying things that are getting recorded and maybe getting shared, and who knows whose hands I'll end up with at some point in time. But so be it. I've been getting into trouble quite a bit over the last 40 years of Rotary service, so what the heck, might as well continue with that. Let's see if we can share now. So hopefully you can see what we got. Let me see if I can get to where I can. Can everyone see that? Super. So it's an interesting role that I've got. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Rotary. I have been working in this position since October of 2016. I stepped down. I was a trustee of the Rotary Foundation. I stepped down from that position and basically switched from one side of the fence to the other side of the fence, going from being an extremely active, what we call senior leader in Rotary, and suddenly now I'm on the executive management team for the staff, and managing a group of about 38 to 40 individuals. There's several different groups within the 40 people that I manage. There's a business intelligence group, there is a strategy team, there's a research and evaluation team. Enterprise projects are managed by our project managers, and we typically have close to 15 enterprise projects going on every year. We have a product delivery team and a business process improvement group that I manage. So I took the position to develop a new vision and strategy for the organization. And suddenly I found myself managing all those other teams at the same time. So it has been a very interesting experience, to say the least. So I pulled a couple of quotes that I think are really valuable for us to keep in mind. And as Ed indicated, things have changed and changed drastically. And as we fell into this situation, most of us thought in the context of 2 months. I mean, I quite frankly, when I packed my bag in Evanston to drive home, I had no idea that I would be here for almost 3 months straight. And quite frankly, it's highly likely that I'll be here for at least 3 more months. And so these are the kinds of things that we really need to keep in mind. And you can see from the Harvard Business Group, the quote, "Be prepared to learn and pivot." And, you know, I think that ties into the youth exchange experience for all of you. We hosted 3 different students over the years, and each one was completely different than the other. And we, as the host family, had to learn and pivot, and as did the students. And I treat the experience that we're going through in terms of Rotary as an opportunity more than anything. So this is probably the most meaningful graphic display that we have put together in the 3.5 years that I've been in this position. This was put together in combination between the business intelligence team and the research and evaluation team, and done for me. I was asked by the board a month ago to lead the board in a discussion around the COVID crisis and how we need to prepare for what might be coming. There was tremendous concern among the board members of Rotary International as to what will happen with membership. What you see on this graph in the blue line is the actual membership figures for Rotary International since the beginning, since 1905. And the yellow line is the annual giving. That is the giving to our annual fund. And obviously we didn't have an annual fund until after Paul Harris passed away in the late 1940s. What you see with the gray bars are world events. And we highlighted a few of them in this graph to give you a sense of potentially the impact of world events on both membership and annual giving over the course of our history. And what is really interesting in this is the very significant impact, particularly recently, on annual giving by world events. And what is equally interesting is the actual lack of impact on membership of world events. And this really has changed to some extent the focus of the board as we look to this next year. And that's not to say that we won't see an impact on membership. Don't get me wrong. But this gives us a sense of what happened. If you look at the Great Depression in this frame here, the impact on membership, this was the most significant drop in membership as a result of a world event. But it wasn't until the third year of the Great Depression that we saw a decline in membership. Very similarly with World War II, the first 2 years of the war did not cause a decrease in membership, at least not significantly. But the third year in particular saw an impact. And you see that also with the Asian financial crisis and the dot-com bubble, in the actual Great Recession of 10 years ago. We didn't see a drop in membership until we were actually coming out of the recession. So this is helpful for the board. In the process, we looked at a lot of world events beyond just the ones that are highlighted by the gray bar in the previous display. We also have on staff, as part of the research and evaluation team, a young man, Manny Wiedma, who has a PhD in statistical analysis. So he did some forecasting for us. He also did some linear regression modeling based on these membership numbers to give us a real sense of, is there or isn't there an impact by these world events? And he found, and he did some auto regression analysis of the membership numbers. So it isn't just, you know, if you go back to that membership graph, and I'll go back for a second to that. There really are two different lines relative to membership. You have the period from 1905 to 1995, where membership continued to climb. And then from somewhere in the mid-90s forward, of course, membership has flattened out. And I will highlight that I was a district governor right at this point in time, so I will take part of the blame for our membership suddenly flattening out, I guess. In any case, when you're doing modeling, you cannot treat this blue line as a continuous line. You have to treat it as two separate lines. And so he did that in the process of his analysis, Manny did. In any case, he found that there is no statistically significant impact on membership with world events. There is on annual giving, and it's significant, and it's very rapid. And that's the interesting thing. But here is his projection for membership for Rotary worldwide over the next few years. He's predicting a drop on July 1 of a little less than 1%. But if you take 2 standard deviations into account, you could see an increase in membership by close to 1%, or a drop in membership as much as 2.8 or almost 3%. And so there's a 95% chance that we'll see membership as of July 1 falling within this area from here to here. And of course, as he predicts farther out, it gets more and more difficult to predict what might happen. And so you see the increasing gap on the standard deviations that we've got. You know, and this is really valuable for us from a planning perspective in terms of budgeting, in terms of anticipating what we might say. A drop in membership of 1%, bottom line for Rotary International, it's somewhere in the range of about $800,000. And that's against a total budget that ranges somewhere in the range of about $125 million a year. So certainly 800,000 is significant, but it's not as big an impact as many of the directors might have otherwise thought going into the year. And it kind of calmed everyone down. It helped us, you know, kind of focus on what we need to be concerned about in the short term. And certainly we're concerned about membership, and we always have been, but you know, it's maybe something that it's a little bit longer term issue than it is an immediate short-term issue. One of the benefits for us moving forward is membership. Now we get 2 reads a year that are accurate because membership dues are paid twice a year now. And up until the last 3 or 4 years, they were only paid once a year in July. And now, at least when we get into January and the second half of the due statement is due, we'll get a better sense, you know, as to whether or not there's going to be a drop in membership. And certainly we're taking into account the fact that what we're into right now is something we've never been into. This is not just a world crisis, but it's one that's affecting the ability of our clubs to meet. And that's something we've never really experienced. Certainly World War II had an impact on clubs meeting to some extent, but not in the context that we're experiencing right now. So as we start to think about membership and what might happen with Rotary, we need to keep in mind what is going on. And over the last decade, we've had more people join than we have members. So it's a bit of a revolving door. The team put together for me an analysis of years in Rotary. So if you look at these blue bars, there are on this blue bar, each of these blue bars represent the average over the last 5 years of the classes, the number of Rotarians that are in a class. And a class is defined as a group that all joined in the same Rotary year. So the people that are in their first year, that are just recently joining, other than those that just joined at the end of the year, have been averaging about 75,000 people worldwide. And then the group that's in their second year, in effect, between 1 and 2 years, is the largest group. And it represents about 110,000 members, which is close to, 10% of our members worldwide. And so on with these blue bars, we march, and you can see that every class after the group that's in their second year of membership gradually decreases in number. And there is a significant drop between year 2 and year 3. And similarly, pretty good sized drop between year 3 and 4. And then it starts to tail off generally. Now, these are worldwide figures, so it's going to vary by your district and your club and the regions of the world. And we have some of that analysis. And this is fascinating because this is Western Europe. And if you kind of go back and forth between the previous graph and Western Europe, you'll see that the Western European Rotarians do a better job of hanging on to their members. And this is a good contrast to keep in mind, because our president starting July 1 is Holger Knock, who is from Germany and Western Europe. And he speaks about caring for members and the importance of picking your members carefully and caring for them. And clearly, what he is talking about, I think, is part of the reason why they do a better job of of keeping their membership once someone joins. So as we start to figure out how we move forward, I just love this quote. You know, and most politicians think in this, good politicians anyway, think of things in this context as Winston Churchill did. I've been really encouraging clubs, districts, the board, of course, in the context of looking at how we move forward. It's really important that we don't lose sight of the new priorities that we've developed under our action plan. This is an opportunity to pivot and enhance Rotary, but let's do it in the context of what we planned. And so those are the 4 priorities that the and this, of course, is at the heart of the reason I took this position, was to drive a new strategy for the organization moving forward. And I can, at some point in time, I would be happy to go into detail on why we developed each of these priorities and what is behind them in terms of our objectives and the initiatives we're undertaking to drive them. But it gives you a sense of impact in the context of measuring the value of our service. Expanding our reach, we're really looking beyond just our clubs, beyond participants, beyond our alumni. How can we expand the reach of our activities and our Rotary experience, extending it to others? Enhancing participant engagement, I want to focus on that one for a second, because that's at the core of maybe what we should be focusing on right now in light of the crisis and the pandemic. Looking at those numbers, looking at the economy and what's happening, the group that's most likely to leave are clearly going to be the people that have joined in the last 2 to 3 years. And if you can focus on engaging those people, you're going to maybe survive in a better way relative to your membership through this crisis. So, and this will be helpful. Why are people joining? This is the latest data from our survey results. And what's trending is this second bar. We are seeing that global service is becoming more and more important to the people that are joining Rotary, the people that are looking at Rotary. If I were to put in front of you the response to this kind of question among our existing membership, you'd see friendship and fellowship increase significantly. You would see personal growth go down, and global service would also drop. And these, the first one and the last one, become more valuable to the existing membership. But the new members that are just joining are heavily focused on these 2 in the middle. So those are things to keep in mind in the context of pivoting. And obviously, one of the big issues is the alternatives to in-person meetings. I will tell you from a financial perspective, all of Rotary pretty much stopped traveling in the second week of March. And I would doubt that any of you could guess how much money we have saved in airline travel for Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation in the context of that time frame from the end of March through the end of this fiscal year, which is through June. Literally, we're looking at over $5 million in savings on travel, leaving out hotel rooms, etc. And that, to some extent, is helping us through this crisis. If there is going to be a drop in membership, we have an additional cushion that's being added to our reserve fund from the savings in not paying for travel. So the interesting thing is your governor-elect, Ed, you get your full budget next year. We aren't changing that, despite the fact that you're probably not likely to travel nearly as much. And you could maybe use those expenses for other things. It may be that you don't spend all of that money, but it is a very significant change in the organization. The board and the trustees have both decided that The boards, both of them, will not meet in person through the end of the calendar year. The trustees are already talking about it being very likely that they will not meet in person before the Taipei convention. No committees at Rotary International are going to meet in person over the next several months through the end of December. And it's highly likely that'll be extended. We have institutes, of course, that meet above the district level. Almost every institute around the world, and there's 22 of them, is not meeting in person this coming fall. So that there's a lot of changes, a lot of events that are being handled in a completely different way. And of course, what we don't think about very often is what's happening to service in this context. For many Rotarians, hands-on service is tremendously valuable and important. And we need to look at new ways to serve. And we need to look at ways in which we can activate and engage Rotarians in the context of not being able to do some of the areas of service that we've always done. And certainly youth exchange is right in that category. What are you going to do when you're not bringing students in and not sending them out over the course of the next year? In a lot of our informal groups and more formalized organizations in Rotary are taking this pause period as a great time to step back and analyze just what we're doing and whether or not we can enhance and improve the ways in which we do deliver service. So one of the things the board decided to do in light of the presentation and the discussions that followed what I presented is to create a pandemic response task force, which is only to exist for through the end of October. The purpose of the task force is to really take advantage of virtual connectivity in the long term for Rotary. So as I indicated, we have 22 institutes worldwide where we bring together district leaders, and much of what happens at those institutes is training. All of that training is going to be done online this fall. And the question is that a more efficient or more effective or a less expensive method of training that we should take advantage of moving forward, far beyond just this next year? And there's a lot of things like that. I think that I have talked enough, at least in terms of the presentation format, and I would instead love to kind of field questions, engage in discussions with you around what you see going forward. I would say, just so you know, we have 62 committees at the international level of Rotary, almost evenly split between Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation. I would anticipate that those committees long-term will significantly reduce the number of times that they meet in person. We spend almost $2 million a year on just bringing in committee members into Evanston to meet in person, to put them up in hotels. And quite frankly, those meetings certainly are productive, but it's difficult for a lot of the people involved. You can imagine flying in for a 2-day meeting from Taipei, and the jet lag, and the average age of the committee members is similar to the average age of the Rotarians when I joined the Hopkins Club. I think it's somewhere between 85 and 102. So it's hard for them to stay awake through the committee meetings and really, to be honest, to really engage as a Rotarian. When you're coming from halfway across the planet, you come in a day in advance, you get 1 day to try to adjust to the time zone, and then you're sitting in a meeting for 8 hours straight when you're normally asleep for the entire 8 hours. It's really hard for those individuals to contribute in a meaningful way. And it's much easier on everyone, maybe it is, to meet for an hour or two in a Zoom format and conduct maybe over the course of 2 or 3 Zoom meetings what you might have otherwise done in 2 full days in Evanston. So that's what we're starting to experience. I am spending odd hours of the day now at meetings. I have a regular meeting with trustees at 6 a.m. every Friday, because half the group is coming from Australia or Sri Lanka or Korea, and so we have to do it at 6 a.m. so that someone else doesn't have to do it at 2 a.m. But that's the new world for Rotary, I think, and I don't think it's going to disappear for a long time to come. But there's a lot more to it than just the way in which we're meeting. I think the issue is, and you're looking at it, you're an eClub, and for most of the world today, almost every club is an eClub right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we have accelerated the adoption of technology by Rotary worldwide at a very rapid pace, and I hope we don't lose some of what we've gained from this. So,
some of our previous speakers have spoken to engagement over e-platforms and Zoom with members who may be south for the winter or in different parts of the country who would never, would take months off from regular meetings and now are able to join on a more regular basis. That balanced with other clubs who I'm not sure have moved to this format. So I think it is an opportunity, and like you say, maybe a nice, well, even like the Facebook Live option for any regular club to just be able to engage with other members or people in the community. I think there's some really nice opportunities. Tom, thanks for the presentation so far. Anne Pritch had a comment that she put in chat. And if you can take yourself off of mute and you can just ask that to Tom yourself. And then if anyone else has a question, either throw it into chat or just unmute yourself and I can call on you.
So Anne, I apologize, but I cannot tell you. I have no idea what the Russian clubs might be doing in terms of grant projects or projects generally. Russia is in a very unique situation in terms of structure. We're reorganizing their district in a completely different way with a different management structure. We do not have governors there because we were struggling with the current leadership structure there. And quite frankly, what's happening in Russia is our friend Putin is not very supportive of Rotary. It's looked at as an American institution, and he considers it a threat. So we have struggled to grow Rotary in Russia over the last 6 to 7 years. And it's a difficult territory to manage. If you can imagine the size of Russia, and what we're talking about is only 800 Rotarians.
Wow, in low number,
a country of that size. So, when I was on the board, we were spending $100,000 a year as the allocation to the governor for Russia because of the cost of travel within that country to visit those clubs. And if you think of that, 100,000 a year spread amongst 800 or 1,000 members, we're spending a lot more on that country than we were collecting in dues by far. So.
And do you have a personal connection to Russia? I'm just curious about your interest in, or where the question is.
Yes, I have just started making some connections through Sharon Tennyson, who is the person who really gave birth to our present Rotary Exchange. She's still working there very deeply. She knows all the parties. She does not work in Moscow because just too many political considerations, but her reach is tremendous throughout the rest of the country. And so I'm just personally trying to get connected up. eClub of World, we Rotary had several Russian members, Russian speaking members.
Sure.
And I think it would be really wonderful if Rotary would just, I think among us, we could do some outreach, Tom, and really move this along. The language barrier is tremendous, but there are people who speak English, and here who speak Russian. So if you could point me to anybody who's interested in this, I would raise my hand on this.
Yeah, so there's a past director, past vice president of Rotary, Dean Roars from the Vancouver area. And she is the volunteer that's helping restructure the governance in Russia. And so she's really well connected right now with the leadership there and can really jumpstart things for you quite nicely. So happy to connect you with Dean and give you the email address. So.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ann. And Ann, thanks for your passion here. One sec, Joe. There's a question here from Jane on chat about being interested in what you're hearing about local club meetings. Now that we've mostly migrated to an eClub environment, do you see the clubs continuing in this phase for a while?
Yeah, hi Tom, and thanks so much for your time. You know, something I've heard in our Rotary Club is now that we're seeing some benefits of Zoom, we don't mind skipping some of the costs associated with, let's say, you know, $14 a meal. And we could really, like our club being in Minneapolis right now, there's certainly a rebuilding the community. And if we don't spend $14 a week on breakfast, we could really reallocate that money to give in a bigger way. So I was just wondering, heard trends of, you know, what local clubs are considering post-COVID, if it's a blend, you know, some being in person, some Zoom. It's certainly wonderful to have Zoom as a continued option, especially for elderly members that might feel comfortable or are as mobile. So just wanted to get your gauge on that.
Yeah, so we have just completed a survey of all of the club presidents of both Rotary Club clubs. I have the quantitative details on that survey, but I don't yet have the qualitative responses. But I can tell you 80% of all clubs are meetings in an online format in some form.
Great.
20% is a little frightening to me that are not meeting. I'm happy that it's at 80, but of the 80% that are meeting, 40% of those clubs have a lower attendance at their online meetings. 30% have the same numbers attending, and 20% are seeing an increase in attendance with the Zoom format. We have a number of qualitative questions that we've asked that kind of dives into some of the stuff you're asking, Jane. And this is what the pandemic response task force is really interested in, which is what do they anticipate doing as they go forward? I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a large number of clubs that maybe meet twice a month in person and once or twice a month in an online format. I could see a hybrid, and that's one of the things the task force is looking at. Can we develop a hybrid meeting format where people actually meet in person and meet in the Zoom format simultaneously, so that you can have some people who have, you know, gone south, attend your meetings. You know, it's interesting.
Or you get stuck in a meeting. You get stuck in a meeting, and you're not going to make the regular in person. You can just hop right on. I think there's potential for it for sure.
Yeah, no question. And you know, I had not attended my own meeting for several months, being in Evanston every Thursday noon, and I haven't missed a meeting in the last 7 weeks now. 8 weeks, because I'm attending by Zoom. Of course, here I am in Eden Prairie, and I'm going to my Eden Prairie Noon meetings by a Zoom format, but what the heck, you know.
That's great. Joe, I cut you off, so please go ahead.
I just wanted to comment in response to Ann. I was on a Rotary friendship, or not friendship exchange, but international travel and hosting pre-tour to Russia this past June, a year ago before the Hamburg convention. And we had an opportunity to meet with several Rotary clubs in Russia. And I'd be happy to share with you some of the experiences that we had, and also a couple of contacts who've been very active in Rotary in Russia. So let's connect after this sometime.
Thank you so much. Joe also commented here in chat that the pandemic is forcing us to innovate in ways unimaginable, that isn't all bad. I mean, I think we're all finding, you know, working from home it's not the same, but I know speaking for myself, I'm in the office today, but I'll be at home tomorrow. It's quite nice. So, Bob, you had an observation. Would you like to share that?
Sure. I am totally deaf in my left ear and have a hearing aid in my right ear. And Zoom meetings are actually a better quality experience for me. I can see everyone, and every person that speaks, I hear them clearly. And when I'm in a large group, that's rarely the case. I'm saying "huh" more often than I'm saying anything else. We have had out in Western North Dakota clubs that are starting to meet in smaller groups. But one of the things that we did early on is we provided through district Zoom access to every club. And so we upgraded them to Zoom Pro, and we are encouraging them to use Zoom even during that time when they're meeting live again. Part of it is, as you were describing, John, you know, there may be someone who can catch up on a meeting that they're planning. But the other part is, frankly, there's outstanding speakers that we're able to get that would never be available if they had to go in person. And, you know, an example, and Tom, you know, International Falls, Barry Razin is going to be speaking to International Falls in July. You know, that could not possibly happen in a live situation, but through Zoom, you know, he can spare 15 minutes and they'll have a chance to hear Barry.
Well, July's more likely than January, though. We'll say that.
True.
You know.
That is true. But
thanks so much, Bob. Thank you. Tom, we have a question from Vicki. How's the pandemic impacted the polio work? You know, so far we're just kind of getting into the pandemic, but there's got to be a huge impact on polio outreach and vaccinations and whatnot.
Yeah, very significant, and none of it's good news. We have stopped all immunizations in Pakistan and Afghanistan, which is, of course, the one area that is still endemic. And they're actually now just at the point where they are just about to restart the immunizations, but they've gone a full 3 months during a critical period without being able to immunize. And then, of course, we're struggling with what our president has announced relative to the World Health Organization and the disconnect of our government and the funding. And the U.S. is, of course, the #1 funder of WHO and the #1 funder of WHO in the context of polio eradication. So we are doing a very significant amount of work in DC right now with our volunteers. And if you've got a connection with a congressman or a senator, it's really important right now to reach out and indicate the importance of continuing to fund both the polio effort and WHO. But we may see funds directed to Rotary now that otherwise maybe went to WHO, but this is a real challenge for us. It's really significant. And in fact, I have a Zoom meeting on Friday at 6 a.m. with a handful of trustees and Mike McGovern, who's the head of the polio eradication effort for Rotary, to actually talk about the challenges with WHO, or really with our president, to be honest. So.
Thanks, Tom. A challenge to be sure. Heather, would you like to unmute and talk about flexibility and younger leaders and families and children?
Yeah, no, this is Heather from the Hudson Daybreak Club now, formerly River Falls Club. No, I'm just excited to hear about the changes both with RI and at the district level. I think the travel and the amount of time that was required to serve in a role like district governor pretty much, I mean, okay, well, we had an exception last year, but I mean, pretty much has made it impossible for anybody who doesn't have an incredibly flexible work schedule or who has kids to make that commitment. And so I think the thought that you could do club meetings virtually, that we could do district meetings virtually. I mean, we're trying to get younger members, yes, and I think younger leaders, and I think that's gonna help with that. So I'm excited. I hope this is not a temporary change, that this is gonna be a change to how we do business moving forward. So yeah.
One of the things I anticipate that we'll be doing is to pilot some work relative to district governors making virtual visits to analyze it, to look at how to do it in the best way possible. Does it make sense? Are there ways in which we can really take advantage of that, without any question? And the very issue you bring up is a really significant one. I didn't mention the fourth priority of increasing Rotary's ability to adapt, and that's part of our plan. But I will tell you that we continue to be concerned about diversity and different opinions at the highest levels of Rotary. And when the average age of our governors-elect comes in at 61, 62, 63 years of age, that, you know, not to say that Ed isn't an amazing guy to be stepping into the role on July 1, but, you know, there are a lot of people that could bring a lot to the table that aren't necessarily retired. And, you know, I mean, I served at a point when quite frankly, I shouldn't have. As a member of my family and the challenges that imposed, difficult time. And, you know, I was criticized because I held joint meetings with the clubs on my visits. And for years, the governors after me talked about Tom, well, he didn't really visit every club in the way he was supposed to. And that actually is permitted under the current rules, but that's the stuff we are challenged with all the time. And we're really trying to break away from those things. You know, and you know, we complain a lot about the lack of diversity at the board level, and it's largely because it's just really difficult to get a diverse group serving as governors, and you just can't move up the ladder unless you've become a past governor. So yeah, we end up with a board that average age of board members is somewhere around 75. You know, and regardless of whether it's male or female, you know, just to not have the diversity of age that we should be having, let alone all the rest of the diversity of opinions and experiences and things that you could bring to the table. So we don't need any more old guys like Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, we have a number of chats. We have comments about Rotary being huge in Taiwan. So while diversity is a challenge in our country, in this country, Taiwan is huge. There's questions about what's happening in Africa. Let's see, there's another one here about, oh, Anne mentioned Pakistan and some needs there if people are trying to get 2 ventilators funded. So, like, you know, around the world, Rotary seems to be growing in certain spots, you know, a challenge in Russia, but how are things looking in Africa? How are that, you know, is Asia a hotspot? Is there anything that we could learn from the world to increase diversity here at home?
Yeah, so just trying to think of the exact number. I think, and I'm not going to be exactly right. I know the percentage we have dropped in North America, that is in Canada and the US, and I believe it's over the last 10 years, we have dropped 18.9% in membership, which is just off the scale.
So in your chart, when you're showing membership fairly, you know, flat over the past number of years with this potential to dip 1%, 2%, 3%, that's not taking into account where in the world membership is growing, right?
Yeah, the membership is exploding in the East. And for the first time, we have exactly the same number of Rotarians in the East as we have in the West. And it's actually an interesting situation. Next year, not next year, but the year after, we will have a board of 19 people. Now, we don't know who the president-elect will be because that person hasn't been picked yet. But there will be on the board 8 women from the Western world. Shekhar will be president from India. And the rest of the board, other than the president-elect, largely from the East, and will be male. I mean, it's a fascinating board that's coming up. But it tells you what's happening with the organization. And we made a concerted effort, obviously, in the Western world to get women into the board positions in the last couple of years, which is great. But it's not happening in the East. It's an all-male organization in the East. And they may be younger on average age, no question about that, but they are not heavy in leadership that's female. Africa's growing, particularly in pockets around Uganda and Nigeria in particular. It's a much, much younger organization in Africa. They have a lot of churn right now, but their average age is 13 years younger than what we see in North America. Still tremendously male dominated, but pockets of a lot of women in Africa, in certain parts of Africa. It really varies so much by region. And when I give worldwide figures, I just always have to caution everybody that it is so different by region around the world.
Thank you. Thanks. I wonder, just coming back to Zoom again and these virtual e-meetings and, structuring things that might work out for younger people, whether wherever they are, to be able to join or become part of Rotary, like through like Facebook Live today. You're sitting and you happen to see the meeting and you find it interesting. Maybe you come back the following week and et cetera, et cetera. I kind of wonder what that will do, and if this stays on as a format, either as a regular format or an occasional format or a simulcast format, what that impact might have on diversity and younger members here in the US. It certainly can't hurt, from the amount of time that my two kids spend on their phones, that, maybe we're onto something here. Maybe the pandemic will, in the long run, have a positive growth impact on Rotary.
We've done a lot of analysis by age as to what would be attractive and what's not, and I can even give it to you by the 20 to the 29-year-old, the 30 to the 39-year-old in regions of the world, and all those kinds of things. Technology is certainly one of the issues that we face. Service is big, and you saw the difference with global versus local, which would tell you that what you do which is obviously a global way in which you serve. And although I don't know, do you really serve in the context of youth exchange? I mean, how can you host a student if you're an eClub? I don't know about that, but in any case, it really, impact is significant. The younger an individual is, the more important impact is. And when I talk about impact, I'm talking about in the context of service. So people, the younger you are, the more you want to see actual lasting change from the service that you're engaged in and part of. It's not good enough to just do what feels good. It is, and our giving is much, much different. Our method of giving, which I classify as a united way kind of giving, we want you to give to this pot and we will decide how it's spent at the higher levels, is not the way people give for younger people. The younger you are, the more you want to target your giving to a cause, and a cause that is impactful. So whether or not we have the environment, that's a cause that's extremely popular among people under the age of 40. And if we're going to take on the environment, are we going to be impactful with our work? Are we just going to do things that feel good, and yet we have no results, no measurements to prove that what we're doing is really impactful? And hence that first priority of measuring impact in enhancing our ability to actually drive lasting change. But yeah, there's, believe me, we've done a lot of research. We can regionalize it for districts, for clubs, not for clubs so much, but certainly for regions around the world, to give some sense of what you may need to do to enhance your success. I will say on the membership side, we have an experiment underway right now where we have created a non-club-based model where people join Rotary International directly and not through a club, not through a district. It's a platform, and there'd be opportunities to improve the person's personal growth, opportunities to serve through local clubs that they may be near, opportunities to connect, opportunities to be mentored. In fact, much of what's going to be offered in this non-club-based model is dependent on having clubs and Rotarians at a local level that can help meet the needs and provide the service opportunities. But that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to experiment with to help keep us relevant. And much of that model is an online kind of experience, no doubt about it.
Thanks very much. I love this concept of targeted giving as opposed to donate to the pot and, you know, we'll figure out what to do with it either on the club level, district level, or RI level. So yeah, that's, you know, it's got my wheels turning a bit just even for our eClub, but I'm sure everyone else on the call as well. We are a few minutes over 5:30, our ending time. Any final questions for Tom? Otherwise, we always end with the four-way test.
So before we end, I just want you to know that when I was in charge of the youth exchange program for this region, I set the record for the most number of students that came home early and we sent home early. So I probably go down in history as the worst chair of the youth exchange program ever for North Star. So, but I have great stories from that I can't really tell in most Rotary settings. So
Oh, come on.
I really appreciate
it's been
the time
20 years.
and
You can share one. It's been 20 years. All right.
That's why I said in your introduction, I think it was 1999. I think there was something in the air.
It could have been leadership. I was in charge. Who knows?
Tom, you can share those stories when John does the after dark version of this.
That's right. Yeah, the unedited.
Believe me, we have stories.
Oh, sounds good. A couple more chat things here, but let's move just in terms of people's time here. Let me get this current slide. Oops. And here we go. So we always end with the four-way test. If you can please unmute yourself. You know, most clubs start with this. We find it a nice way to end the meeting and kind of go about the rest of your day and evening. So the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill
and better friendships?
You know what? We need
beneficial to all
concerned.
We need the bouncing ball that goes with the words.
Yeah, I know we do. Oh, let's see. So let's go back to our next week's speaker. Put your hand over the screen again. Sarah Tubity, former exchange student from the East Coast. You know, great example for, was it Ed that brought up, or people, you know, who are not in your area that can be a part of your club and be a speaker. So Sarah speaking on limb differences, being an exchange student and thriving in life. So really thanks everybody for the great meeting tonight. Really fun and look forward to seeing you next week. And Tom, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to see everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Thank you, John, Tom.
Kirk, is there a way to stop the live feed?